My son-in-law forgot his cell phone at my house. When it buzzed with an incoming message, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A photo of my wife, who had been dead for 3 years, smiling in a way I'd never seen before. The message beneath her picture read, "Missing you terribly, my love. Can't wait for tonight." But Isadora was buried 6 feet under Arizona soil. So, who was texting my son-in-law, and why were they using my dead wife's face? Before I tell you this mystery, please subscribe and share what city you're watching from, because the truth I uncovered will send chills down your spine. The October morning sun streamed through my Phoenix kitchen window as I worked through the breakfast dishes. 3 years since Isadora's heart gave out, and I still set 2 coffee cups before remembering. Old habits die hard. I was scrubbing plates when I heard the buzzing. Caisson's phone, forgotten on my granite counter after his visit an hour ago, vibrated against the stone. My son-in-law was always checking that device, fingers constantly dancing across the screen. The phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up automatically. From where I stood at the sink, I couldn't help but glance over, and my world stopped. Isadora's face smiled up from the illuminated screen. Not the tired, sick Isadora from her final months, but a version of my wife I'd never seen before. Her eyes sparkled with genuine joy, her smile radiant and alive. She looked happy, genuinely impossibly happy. I dropped the plate I was holding. It clattered in the sink as I moved closer, my heart hammering. The message previewed beneath her photo made my blood freeze. "Missing you terribly, my love. Can't wait for tonight." This couldn't be real. Isadora had been dead for 3 years. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone. I knew I shouldn't look. This was Cassaine's private device, but that was my wife's face on the screen. My dead wife smiling in a way I'd forgotten she could smile. I touched the screen and more messages appeared. Dozens of them stretching back months, all with photos of Isadora. Photos I'd never taken in places I didn't recognize. Wearing clothes I'd never bought her. "You make me feel alive again. Last night was perfect. When can we meet again?" The kitchen spun around me. Someone was using my wife's image for some twisted relationship. But these weren't old messages. Some were from last week. The contact was saved simply as R. I scrolled deeper, unable to stop myself. The messages grew intimate, detailed, references to secret meetings, shared moments. A life that couldn't exist because Isadora had been buried for 3 years. Unless the terrible thought crept in. What if these weren't someone impersonating Isadora? What if they were real? What if my wife had been living a secret life before her death? I remembered those final weeks with New Clary, Isadora's mysterious doctor appointments. Her sudden improvement in mood despite her failing health. The way she'd started dressing up for simple errands. Phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Signs I dismissed as a dying woman trying to feel alive again. The messages painted a picture of passion, of stolen moments. "You make me remember what it feels like to be wanted." Read one. "I never knew I could feel this way at my age," said another. "May my Isadora living a double life." I thought about Casey and sitting in my kitchen an hour ago making casual conversation about Atlas's soccer season, about Alaris's new job at the accounting firm. It seemed perfectly normal, perfectly relaxed. But now I wondered, had he been nervous? About forgetting his phone? Had he been hiding something all along? My own phone rang from the counter where I'd left it. I glanced at the caller ID and felt my stomach drop. Kenny'd realized he'd forgotten his phone, and was calling to check on it. I stared at my ringing device, my mind racing. How long had this been going on? Who was our, and most terrifying of all, if Isadora had been having an affair before her death? What else didn't I know? I let the call go to voicemail. Within seconds, my phone buzzed with a text from Casey on, "Hey Lennox, I think I left my phone at your place. Don't touch it. I'll be right over. Don't touch it." Too late for that warning. I'd only looked because I'd seen my dead wife's face, staring up at me. Now I'd uncovered what might be the biggest secret of my marriage. 20 minutes felt like hours as I waited, Cassaine's phone burning like evidence in my hands. I quickly memorized the crucial details. The contact RPT, the cabin, references, the dates stretching back months. Then I placed the phone exactly where he'd left it and forced myself to look busy at the sink. The sound of tires on gravel made my heart jump. I scrubbed the same plate I'd been washing when this nightmare began, trying to appear normal. Clisses. Footsteps on the porch were heavier than usual. When he knocked, there was an urgency I'd never heard before. "Come in," I called, keeping my voice steady. He appeared in the kitchen doorway. His usual composed demeanor cracked around the edges. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool October morning. and his eyes darted immediately to the counter. "Sorry to bother you again, Lennox," he said, moving quickly toward his phone. "Can't function without this thing." I watched him carefully as he grabbed the device, noting how his fingers trembled as he checked the screen. His shoulders sagged with relief. But there was something else there too. "Fear everything. All right," I asked, drying my hands. "You seem rattle just work stress," he replied too quickly, slipping the phone into his pocket. "Big presentation today. Can't afford to be unreachable." It was reasonable, but I'd known Cassian for 15 years. He'd never been the type to get flustered over presentations. The man who had calmly handled Iris's emergency appendectomy was now fidgeting like a guilty teenager. "How's Atlas adjusting to the new school?" I asked, testing him with normal conversation. Good, really good." His responses were clipped, distracted. He kept patting his pocket where the phone rested, as if reassuring himself it was secure. I studied his face as we talked. Really looked at him for the first time in months. When had those dark circles appeared under his eyes? When had he started checking his phone obsessively during family dinners? When had he begun making excuses to leave early from our Sunday gatherings? Signs I'd attributed to normal stress now seemed more sinister. "Well, I should get going," Kay said abruptly, already backing toward the door. "Thanks for keeping it safe." "Of course," I replied. "See you Sunday for dinner." "Wouldn't miss it," he said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. I watched from the window as he drove away his truck, disappearing around the corner faster than necessary. Only then did I process what I'd witnessed. This wasn't the case, and I knew the steady, reliable man who'd married my daughter. This was someone with secrets, someone running scared. But scared of what? Of me discovering those messages, or of whoever R was. I sank into Isadora's favorite armchair, the leather still holding the faint scent of her perfume. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room where we'd shared 42 years of what I'd thought was an honest marriage. Now I had to face the possibility that I'd been living a lie, that my wife had been living a double life, and worse, that someone was continuing that deception, using her memory for purposes I couldn't understand. The questions multiplied in my mind. Who was her? How long had this been going on? And most terrifying, if Kays was involved in this twisted game, what did that mean for Atlas? That evening, as I sat in Isadora's chair, watching the desert sunset paint the sky orange and purple, one question haunted me above all others. If someone was using my dead wife's photos to carry on some sick relationship, who was it, and why had they chosen her? The answer I feared might destroy what was left of my family. Wednesday morning brought an unexpected knock at my door. I'd spent a sleepless night wrestling with questions about Isidora, and the sight of my daughter on my porch at 8 a.m. sent alarm bells through my system. Looked terrible. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually perfect hair hung limp around her shoulders. She clutched her purse like a lifeline. "Dad, we need to talk about Cassian," she said without preamble. "Something's been bothering me for months." I stepped aside to let her in my heart, hammering coffee. She followed me to the kitchen where I'd been staring at the same counter where Kay's phone had revealed its secrets yesterday. "Dad, I think my husband is lying to me." I poured 2 cups with steady hands, though my mind raced. "How much should I reveal?" "What makes you say that?" I asked carefully. Alice wrapped her hands around her mug. "He's been different, secretive. Leaves for work earlier, comes home later, claims of a time. But when I called his office last week, they said he'd left at 3 o'clock. I sat across from her, remembering Cassian's nervous behavior yesterday morning. Maybe he's planning something. That's what I tried to tell myself. She shook her head. But it's more than that. He's protective of his phone now. Never leaves it around. Takes it to the bathroom. Sleeps with it under his pillow and the calls. Dad, late night calls he takes outside. My blood chilled. Late night calls, secret meetings. The pattern was becoming clearer. "Have you tried talking to him?" Last month he got angry. Really angry. Said I was being paranoid, that I should trust him. But Dad, the way he looked at me like I was an enemy, not his wife. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. My strong daughter was falling apart. "There's something else," she whispered. "Money's been disappearing from our joint account. Small amounts, but regular." When I asked, he said, "Work expenses," but couldn't show receipts. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Secret meetings, hidden expenses, phone protection. And now I knew why. Those messages with Isidora's photos, the mysterious Eros, I said slowly. "What if I told you that your instincts might be right? that there might be more going on than we realized. She looked up sharply. What do you mean? I hesitated. Yesterday's discovery felt too enormous to share yet. But my daughter was suffering. I can't give you details yet, I said carefully. But I think we both need to start paying closer attention to your husband's activities. You mean investigating him? I mean protecting ourselves and Atlas. For the first time since arriving, Alaris's expression shifted from despair to determination. She straightened, and I saw the fighter eyed raised. What do you need me to do? Document everything. Times he leaves when he comes home. Unusual behavior. Don't confront him. Don't let on that you suspect anything. Can you do that? She nodded grimly. Dad, what aren't you telling me? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Through the kitchen window, I could see a police car in my driveway. A woman in a dark suit stepped out, her expression grim and purposeful. Detective Morrison. I'd seen her on the local news covering various cases around Phoenix. This wasn't a social visit. Stay here, I told, my stomach dropping. Had someone reported Casey missing? Had something happened to him? Or worse, had someone discovered what I had found on his phone? As I walked toward the front door, one thought echoed in my mind. Whatever brought a detective to my house this morning, it was going to change everything. I opened the door to find a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and graying hair, pulled back professionally. Her badge gleamed in the afternoon sun. Mr. Webb, I'm Detective Mawson with Phoenix PD. I need to ask you about your wife's death. We've received information suggesting it wasn't from natural causes. The words hit like a physical blow. Behind me, her face pale. May I come in? This concerns both of you. We settled in my living room, Morrison pulling out a notebook while I sat like defendants, awaiting judgment. Mr. Webb, can you walk me through your wife's final weeks? Any changes in behavior, health routine? I described those last months with new clarity. Isadora's mysterious doctor appointments, her sudden energy bursts despite her heart condition, the way she'd started dressing up for simple errands. Did she seem happier during this period? Morrison asked, making notes. Yes. I thought she was accepting her condition, making peace with. I stopped. Why these questions? Morrison flipped through her notebook. Were you aware your wife had a life insurance policy worth $500,000? The room spun. That's impossible. We discussed insuring years ago and decided against it. Too expensive on my pension. The policy was purchased 6 months before her death. Payments came from your joint account, categorized as medical expenses. Gripped my arm. Dad, you would have noticed those payments. Not if someone else managed the finances, Morrison said, and not if they were smaller monthly amounts. My mind raced. Isadora had taken over the bills during her illness, claiming she needed something to keep busy. I'd never questioned the mounting medical expenses. Who's the beneficiary? I asked, dreading the answer. Originally you, Mr. Webb. But it was changed 2 months after your wife's death to a trust managed by Thomas Casey and Webb. Alice whispered. My husband Morrison's expression remained neutral. Mr. Webb, did you take out this policy? No, I've never seen these documents. Did you know about your wife's relationship with your son? The question hung like poison gas, made a small wounded sound. What relationship? I asked, though pieces were falling into place. We have evidence of a romantic involvement before her death. The anonymous tip included specific details about their meetings, communications, and plans. Anonymous tip. Someone claims to have witnessed their relationship. Someone who believes your wife's death wasn't heart failure, and that you discovered the affair and took action. The accusation hit like a sledgehammer. You think I hurt Isadora? Someone did. Right now, Mr. Webb, you're our primary person of interest. A life insurance policy you claim you didn't know about, an affair you claim you didn't know about, and a death that may not have been natural. All stood abruptly. This is insane. My father loved my mother. Ma'am, I understand this is difficult, but we follow the evidence. After Morrison left, promising to return with more questions, and I sat in stunned silence. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room where Isadora and I had shared decades of supposed happiness. Dad, Ella said finally, her voice shaking. If someone's framing you for Mom's death, they've been planning this for years. We need to find out who and why. The terrible irony wasn't lost on me. 24 hours ago, I thought my biggest problem was discovering my wife's secret messages. Now, I was a suspect in her possible elimination. Over the next 3 days, I became amateur detectives following a trail of lies that led back to his final months. What we discovered made my blood run cold. Thursday at Phoenix General Hospital, Dr. Martinez pulled up Isidora's medical records with reluctant cooperation. Your wife's symptoms were unusual for heart failure. He admitted the combination of nausea, vision disturbances, and irregular heartbeat. It's more consistent with digitalis poisoning. But she wasn't prescribed digitalis. I said no. But small doses over time would mimic heart failure perfectly. By the time we saw her, we attributed everything to her existing condition. Friday brought us to the insurance office where claims adjuster Roberts showed us the policy documentation. The application was submitted online. He explained the signature looks questionable. We should have flagged it, but premium payments came through regularly from your joint account. Where did the money go when she died? The beneficiary was changed 8 weeks after her death to something called the Isidora Memorial Trust. Thomas Cassian Webb is listed as sole trustee with full discretionary powers. Saturday at Walgreens provided the final piece. Pharmacist Mrs. Stone remembered Isidora requesting herbal supplements. She wanted preparations containing foxglove extract for her heart condition. I warned her about dosage, but she said her son-in-law was helping manage her medications. Foxglove, the natural source of digitalis. As we drove home Saturday evening, the pattern was undeniable. Someone had been slowly poisoning Isidora with digitalis disguised as herbal supplements, while simultaneously setting up a fraudulent insurance policy. Ashley and Ella said quietly. My husband was ending Mom's life for money. The words hung between us like a death sentence. My son-in-law had been systematically destroying Isidora while pretending to help her. We need to tell Detective Morrison. I said, with what she already thinks you're guilty. This could look like we're framing Cassian to save you. She was right. We needed undeniable evidence. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging into the past or your grandson's future ends. You have until Monday. Alaris went white when I showed her. Atlas. They're threatening. Atlas. The investigation had become personal. Someone was watching us, tracking our progress, and now threatening the most innocent member of our family. We need to get Atlas somewhere safe, I said. And then I thought about Isidora slowly poised by someone she trusted, about the insurance money stolen from her death, about my daughter's marriage built on lies. Then we finished this. But first, we had to protect my grandson. The people who had taken Isidora's life had just made their biggest mistake. They'd threatened Atlas, and that changed everything. As I drove towards house to collect my grandson, one thought burned in my mind. Whoever was behind this had underestimated what a grandfather would do to protect his family. They were about to learn that some lines should never be crossed. Monday morning found me driving alone into the Arizona desert following GPS coordinates from the anonymous message. The October sun was already brutal at 9 a.m., and I knew I was walking into a trap. But it was the only way to protect Atlas and learn the truth. The coordinates led me 40 meters north of Phoenix, deep into the Sonoran Desert where saguaro cacti stood like silent sentinels against the endless blue sky. The road deteriorated from asphalt to gravel to dirt, until I was bouncing along a barely visible track, there wounded between rocky outcroppings and thorny milk-white bushes. The cabin appeared suddenly around a bend. A small weathered structure that he looked abandoned from the outside, but 2 vehicles were parked in its shadow. Kasayan's familiar black pickup and a red sedan I didn't recognize. I parked behind a cluster of boulders about 100 yards away, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through binoculars I'd brought from my hunting days, I could see movement inside the cabin. 2 figures, one definitely Kasim based on his height and build, moving carefully from rock to rock. I crept closer until I could hear voices through the cabin's thin walls. What I heard made my blood freeze. The old man's getting too close. A woman's voice said, that insurance investigator called this morning asking questions about the trust. Morrison thinks he did it. Kay replied, we just need to keep the pressure on until she arrests him. And if she doesn't, if he keeps digging. I pressed closer to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. The woman was young, maybe 30, with dark hair and calculating eyes. She moved around Cassian with the familiarity of a long-term partner. I still can't believe how easy the old lady was to manipulate. She continued, all those months of playing the concerned neighbor, bringing her herbal remedies for her heart condition. She never suspected the foxglove extract was slowly ending her life. Raven, you're a genius, Kay said, pulling her into his arms. Setting up the affair narrative, the insurance policy, even getting her to trust you with her medications. Perfect execution. Ravencroft. The mysterious are from the messages. The photos were inspired, she said, using that old camera app to make new pictures look vintage, creating a whole fake history of romance. Even I almost believed Isidora was having an affair. My legs nearly gave out. There had been no affair. The intimate messages, the romantic photos, all fabricated to create a motive for my supposed crime. They'd been planning to frame me from the very beginning. What about the daughter? Raven asked. Iris is emotional, easily manipulated. Once her father's arrested, she'll be devastated. I'll play the supportive husband, help her through the grief, and we'll have access to everything. The house, the remaining assets, the kid. Speaking of the kid, was threatening him, really necessary. Had to flush the old man out. Make him desperate enough to come here alone. A twig snapped under my foot as I shifted position. Both heads turned toward the window. What was that? Raven whispered. Kays moved to the door, his hand reaching for something I couldn't see. Stay here. I tried to retreat, but my aging knees betrayed me. As I stumbled backward, Cassian appeared around the corner of the cabin, and our eyes met. Well, he said, his voice deadly calm. Lennox Webb, right on schedule. Before I could run, Raven emerged from the cabin, holding a pistol with practiced ease. You should have minded your own business, old man, Kay said, pulling out his own weapon. Now you'll join Isadora, facing death in that desert cabin. I realized everything I'd believed about my family had been built on lies, but I wasn't going down without learning the whole truth. You want to know something funny, Lennox? Kay said, keeping his gun trained on me while Raven moved to block the door. Your precious Isadora never had an affair. Every romantic message, every intimate photo, all fake. The affair was my masterpiece, Raven added with sick pride. I spent months creating a fictional romance using photo manipulation apps and old pictures I stole from your house. Even planted evidence of secret meetings that never happened. My mind reeled, but the messages on your phone were between Raven and me. Kay laughed. We used Isadora's photos as a private joke while we planned her demise. Every I love you was really us celebrating another successful dose of digitalis. You see, we needed a motive for your supposed crime of passion, Raven explained, circling me like a predator. Jealous husband discovers wife's affair, eliminates her in a rage. Classic story. Very believable. The insurance policy was genius. 2Ks continued. Small monthly payments disguised as medical expenses. Automatic withdrawals. You were trusting. Wife never questioned. By the time she died, we had $500,000 waiting. And I was the perfect beneficiary, Raven said. Kasayan's mysterious business partner, completely unknown to your family. The trust fund was just a way to hide the money trail. I forced myself to stay calm to keep them talking. Somewhere out there might be looking for me. I'd left her a note with the GPS coordinates. Insurance in case this went wrong. How long have you been planning this? I asked. 2 years, Kay said proudly. From the moment I realized how much a property was worth, how much life insurance I could take out on Isadora without anyone noticing. Raven and I met at a conference. Realized we both had the skills to pull this off. I'm a pharmaceutical researcher, Raven explained. I knew exactly how to administer digitalis, to mimic natural heart failure. Small doses and herbal supplements gradually increasing until her system couldn't handle it anymore. And I handled the financial side, Ken added. Insurance applications, trust funds, set up, even the fake evidence of the affair. We covered every angle except one, a voice said from the doorway. Detective Morrison stepped into the cabin, her weapon drawn, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Behind them came, her face, a mixture of relief and horror. You forgot that smart daughters don't give up when their fathers are in danger. Morrison continued. Brought us your note with the coordinates. We've been listening to your confession. For the past 10 minutes, Kay spun toward the door, his gun wavering between me and the officers. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Morrison said calmly. Drop your weapons now. Raven made a desperate lunge for the back window, but one of the officers, who was already there, Kazon's gun clattered to the floor as he realized the game was over. As they handcuffed both conspirators, Kazon looked at me with pure hatred. You think you've won? This will destroy all Ares. Atlas will grow up knowing his father was a criminal. No, said firmly, stepping into the cabin. Atlas will grow up knowing his grandfather fought for justice. That his mother was strong enough to help catch the people who hurt his grandmother. For the first time in 3 years, watching Kazon and Raven being led away in handcuffs, I felt like Isadora could finally rest in peace. The truth was out, justice was beginning, and my family, what was left of it, could start to heal. 18 months later, I sat in a Phoenix courtroom, watching my son-in-law face the consequences of taking my wife's life. Justice had been slow, but it was finally here. The trial had lasted 3 weeks, every day, revealing new depths of Cassian and Raven's deception. The prosecution had built an airtight case using the desert cabin confession, financial records showing the fraudulent insurance, policy and medical testimony about the digitalis poisoning. Cassian's defense team had tried everything, claiming temporary insanity, arguing that Raven had manipulated him, even suggesting that I had somehow orchestrated the whole thing to frame him. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the jury had seen through every desperate lie. Now, on sentencing day, I watched the man who'd systematically destroyed my wife sit in shackles, his expensive suit, unable to hide the reality of what he'd become. "Mr. Webb," Judge Harrison said, "would you like to make a victim impact statement?" I stood on unsteady legs and walked to the witness stand one final time, looking out at the packed courtroom, Ella in the front row with Atlas beside her, Detective Morrison in the gallery, reporters scribbling notes. I took a deep breath. "Your Honor, Kay didn't just take my wife's life. He stole her final months, filling them with poison instead of peace. He robbed her of the chance to say goodbye properly, to share her wisdom with her grandson one last time." I looked directly at Cassian, who refused to meet my eyes. But perhaps worst of all, he made her final days a lie. Every kindness he showed her, every offer to help with her medications, every concerned question about her health, all of it was calculated cruelty designed to hasten her death. My voice grew stronger as I continued. Isadora Webb was a teacher for 30 years, a mother who raised 2 children to be good people, a grandmother who believed in the fundamental goodness of humanity. She trusted the wrong person, and it cost her everything. I turned back to the judge. No sentence can bring her back. But justice for Isadora means ensuring that Kazan and Raven never have the chance to deceive and harm another family. Judge Harrison nodded solemnly before delivering the verdicts we'd all been waiting for. "Thomas Cassian Webb, you were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for first-degree homicide, plus 25 years for insurance fraud to run consecutively." Cassian's face crumbled as the reality hit him. Beside him, Raven received 25 years for her role in the conspiracy. As the BA led them away, Cassian finally looked at me. There was no remorse in his eyes, only anger that his plan had failed. Outside the courthouse, O'Leary's and I stood in the Arizona sunshine, Atlas between us, holding both our hands. My grandson had grown taller over the past year and a half, but the ordeal had left its mark. He was quieter now, more cautious about trusting people. "How do you feel, Dad?" Ehlers asked. "Empty," I admitted. "Justice doesn't fill the hole that Isadora's death left behind. It just makes it easier to live with." Atlas looked up at me with eyes that seemed far too old for a 14-year-old. "Grandpa, will Mom and I be okay now?" I squeezed his hand. "We're going to be more than okay. We're going to be a family again. A real one, built on truth instead of lies." Walking away from that courthouse, I realized the hardest part wasn't behind us. It was learning to trust again. To believe that not everyone who smiled at us was hiding deadly intentions. But we would learn together. 2 years after that terrible discovery, I stand in Isadora's garden, watching my grandson, Atlas, help me plant new roses. We've learned that families can survive even the deepest betrayals. The Arizona morning sun warms my shoulders as we work together. Atlas, now 16 and taller than me, handles the heavy lifting while I guide the delicate planting. "Grandpa, do you think Grandma would like these?" he asks, gesturing to the red and white roses. "She'd love them." I tell him, "Your grandmother always said gardens were about hope, planting beauty for the future, even when the present feels dark." O'Learis emerges with iced tea, her smile genuine again. She's rebuilt her life on truth instead of lies. The divorce was quiet and she's dating again carefully, but with hard-earned wisdom. We sit on the porch swing, 3 generations sharing comfortable silence. "Dad, do you ever regret pursuing the truth?" Iris asks. "Sometimes I wonder if ignorance might have been easier." I consider carefully. Easier maybe, but not better. Your mother deserved justice. You deserve to know who you really married, and Atlas deserved to grow up knowing that truth matters more than comfort. Atlas nods seriously. At 16, he's developed maturity that both breaks my heart and fills me with pride. He asks thoughtful, Cliff questions, now thinks critically about people's motives. Hard-earned wisdom. The hardest part wasn't discovering Cassian's crimes. I continue. It was learning that evil wears familiar faces, that betrayal comes from those we love most. But we also learned that honest families are stronger than comfortable lies. I look at the garden where Isadora's ashes rest among her favorite flowers. We held a proper memorial after the trial, celebrating her real life instead of mourning Cassian's fiction. Your grandmother was a teacher. She believed every experience, even painful ones, taught us something valuable. This nightmare taught us to value truth over comfort. Trust our instincts when something feels wrong, and never give up fighting for justice. Alice squeezes my hand. It also taught us we're stronger together. The afternoon stretches peacefully ahead. No more secrets, no more lies, no more looking over our shoulders. Just simple family time built on genuine love and honest communication. As the desert sunset paints the sky in Isadora's favorite colors, I feel complete peace for the first time in years. The investigation that began with a forgotten phone had cost us dearly, but it gave us something precious. Knowledge that we could face the worst betrayals and emerge stronger, that justice was worth fighting for, and that families built on truth survive anything. Remember this, I tell my family. The people closest to us sometimes hide the darkest secrets, but when we have courage to seek truth, no matter how painful, we find something more valuable than comfort. Real love, real trust, and real peace. The roses we planted today will bloom next spring, reminding us that after the harshest winters, beauty returns to those who plant seeds of hope. 3 simple lessons carried us through. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Truth is always worth fighting for, no matter the cost. And family built on honesty can survive anything. Sometimes the people closest to us hide the darkest secrets. Looking back on this true story, I realize that sometimes God places the hardest tests in our lives through the people we trust most. My journey from a grieving widow to someone fighting for justice taught me that the Lord works in mysterious ways, even through tragedy. This true story began with a simple discovery, but became one of those grandpa stories that teaches profound lessons about faith and family. When I found those messages on Kayson's phone, I could have ignored them, chosen comfortable ignorance. But God gave me the strength to seek truth, no matter how painful. The greatest lesson from my true story is this: evil often wears familiar faces, but the Almighty ensures that justice prevails for those who persist. Isadora's memory deserved more than convenient lies. My family deserved better than living with deception. These grandpa stories we carry, tales of betrayal, investigation, and ultimate justice, remind us that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, despite being terrified. When I stood in that desert cabin facing Cassian's gun, I knew God was with me. Today, as I share these grandpa stories with Atlas, I see how truth strengthened our family bonds. We learned that authentic relationships built on honesty survive anything, while those built on lies eventually crumble. My advice to anyone facing deception: follow your gut feelings when people act suspiciously. Never stop pursuing justice, even when the path seems impossible. Most importantly, understand that genuine family connections, rooted in transparency, can withstand life's greatest storms. How would you have handled discovering such devastating betrayal? I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments section. And please subscribe to our channel for more powerful, true stories about resilience, family bonds, and finding strength in life's darkest moments. I found my son lying barely conscious in a roadside ditch, his clothes torn, face swollen, and lips split open. This wasn't an accident. With what little strength he had left, he whispered, "Dad, it was Miranda's father," he said. "Our blood is too low for success." The rage that filled my chest was unlike anything I'd felt since my wife's death. Reginald Ashford had attacked my son's pride and endangered his life. He had hurt my son. Now I would destroy his world. Have you ever faced a powerful person who thought they could crush you because of your background? Comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I'd love to hear your own stories of standing up for what's right. The phone call came at 7:30 in the morning. Just as I was pouring my first cup of coffee, a stranger's voice told me they'd found a young man injured on Highway 20. And when they said Adrian's name, my coffee mug slipped from my hands and shattered on the kitchen floor. I drove faster than I'd ever driven in my life, my heart hammering against my ribs with every mile. Cedar Falls had always been a peaceful town where neighbors knew each other's names, and the biggest worry was whether the Hawkeyes would make it to the Rose Bowl. October mornings like this one usually brought the smell of burning leaves and the sound of high school marching band practice. Instead, I was cradling my unconscious son on the side of a country road, my hands shaking as I dialed 911 at Cedar Falls Community Hospital. I paced the sterile hallways like a caged animal. Adrian had always been special, even as a little boy. While other kids played video games, he was in our garage taking apart old radios, and putting them back together better than before. His mother, God rest her soul, used to say he had magic in his fingers. She'd been gone 10 years now, but I could still hear her voice saying, "That boy is going to create something wonderful someday." Leonard. When Adrian finally opened his eyes, the pain I saw there wasn't just physical. Cut straight through to my heart, Dad. His voice was barely a whisper, rough and strained. "I'm here, son. You're safe now." I squeezed his hand gently. "Can you tell me what happened?" Adrian struggled to sit up, wincing with every movement. "It was Reginald Ashford. Dad, Miranda's father." The name came out like poison. He wanted me to hand over my work. Everything I've been developing for the past 2 years. I felt my blood pressure spike. Reginald Ashford was Cedar Falls' version of royalty. Owned half the commercial district, sat on every important board, and had more money than sense. But I'd never imagined he was capable of this kind of violence. "What exactly did he want, Adrian?" My son looked away, his jaw tightening. "Something valuable. Dead. Something that could change everything." But when I refused to just hand it over, he gestured weakly at his battered face. His men made their point pretty clear. The rage building in my chest was unlike anything I'd felt since Sarah's funeral. This wasn't just about business or money. This was about a powerful man who thought he could crush anyone who stood in his way. He said something else. Dad's voice dropped even lower. He said, "Poor people don't deserve to own valuable things. That people like us should know our place and be grateful for whatever scraps the rich decide to throw our way." Those words hit me like a sledgehammer. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about Adrian's work or Reginald's greed. This was about dignity, respect, and the right of every American to pursue their dreams, regardless of their bank account. Adrian grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Dad, I think we're in more danger than we realize." The drive home felt longer than usual, with Adrian's warning echoing in my mind. Once we were inside our house on Franklin Street, I helped him settle into his favorite recliner and pulled up Sarah's old wooden chair. "Now then," I said, "I need you to tell me exactly what Reginald wanted. If we're in danger, I need to understand what we're dealing with." Adrian's eyes grew brighter when he started talking about his work. "Dad, remember when I was 12 and rewired the garage so Mom could use her sewing machine while you ran power tools?" I smiled despite everything. "Your mother was so proud. Said you'd solved a problem that had been driving us crazy. She told me that night, 'Adrian, you don't just fix things, you make them better. Someday you're going to change the world.'" His voice grew stronger. "I think about those words every day. Dad." I felt Sarah's presence as if she were nodding her approval. "What I've been working on is a renewable energy storage system," Adrian said, leaning forward despite his injuries. "Like a super-efficient battery that can store solar and wind energy for months instead of hours. It could power entire neighborhoods during outages, make clean energy reliable year-round." The passion in his voice reminded me of Sarah, but I could see fear beneath his excitement. "How did Reginald find out?" "Miranda mentioned it during a family dinner. She thought he might invest, helped with patents and funding." Adrian shook his head bitterly. "Instead, he saw dollar signs and wanted it all." "What did he offer?" $50,000 for everything. My research, prototypes, patents, called it generous compensation for a hobby project. Adrian's hands clenched. "Dad, this could be worth hundreds of millions. Could revolutionize how America powers itself." He wanted to buy it for the price of a car. That protective anger surged through me. And when you refused, he got that cold smile and said, "I was being foolish. That people like us should be grateful when our betterers offer opportunities." Adrian's voice hardened. He threatened expensive legal challenges, patent disputes that could drag on for years and bankrupt families like ours. The calculated cruelty took my breath away. This wasn't about money. It was about crushing dreams, keeping people like us in our place. When I still refused, he sent his men. Adrian met my eyes with determination I recognized from his mother. "This technology could change everything, Dad. That's why he wants it so badly. But I'll never give it to him, no matter what he does to us." I barely slept that night, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Adrian's words. By dawn, I knew we couldn't face this alone. Reginald Ashford had money connections and apparently no moral boundaries. We needed someone with experience dealing with dangerous people. That's when I thought of Greg. My older brother had served 2 tours in Vietnam and spent 30 years as a police detective in design, before retiring to his farm outside Cedar Falls. If anyone could help us navigate this mess, it was him. I called him at 6 o'clock in the morning. Leonard Griggs' growly voice came through the phone, instantly alert, despite the early hour. Everything all right? I need your help, Greg. Adrian's in serious trouble, and I don't know who else to turn to. I'll be right there. True to his word, Greg arrived within the hour, his weathered pickup truck pulling into our driveway just as I was starting my second pot of coffee. At 70, he still moved with the purposeful stride of a man who'd spent decades dealing with the worst humanity had to offer. We sat around the kitchen table, the same one where our father used to spread out his carpentry plans and teach us that real men protect their families with their brains, not just their fists. Tell me everything, Greg said, pulling out a small notebook that was as much a part of him as his callous hands. I laid out the whole story. Adrian's invention, Reginald's offer, the beating, the threats. Greg listened without interruption, occasionally jotting down notes, his cop instincts fully engaged. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me with those sharp blue eyes that had interrogated countless suspects. This isn't just a businessman, Leonard, this is a predator. Greg's voice carried the weight of experience. Men like Reginald don't get where they are by playing fair. They get there by eliminating anyone who threatens their empire. Adrien, who had been quietly listening from the living room, hobbled into the kitchen. What do you mean, Uncle Greg? Greg opened his laptop, a surprise for a man his age, and started typing. I still have contacts in law enforcement. Let me do some digging on your Mr. Ashford. For the next hour, we watched Greg work his network. Phone calls to old colleagues, searches through public records, cross-referencing business deals, with suspicious incidents. The picture that emerged made my blood run cold. Look at this pattern, Greg said, turning the screen toward us. Over the past 15 years, at least 6 small business owners in this area have had accidents or health problems shortly after refusing to sell their properties to Ashford Development. He clicked through newspaper articles. A restaurant owner who died in a car crash 2 weeks after rejecting Ashford's buyout offer. A farmer who suffered a mysterious heart attack at 45, right after his family refused to sell their land. A startup founder who disappeared entirely, leaving behind only a note about family pressures. This man doesn't just steal businesses, Greg said grimly. He eliminates obstacles. And right now, Adrien, you're his biggest obstacle. The kitchen fell silent, except for the ticking of Sarah's old wall clock. I felt like I was seeing Reginald Ashford clearly for the first time, not just as a greedy businessman, but as something far more dangerous. So, what do we do? I asked. Greg closed the laptop and looked at both of us. We need concrete evidence of his crimes, and we need someone who knows his operations from the inside. Someone close enough to the phone rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. We all froze, staring at it. That might be our answer, Greg said quietly. The voice on the other end of the phone was soft, trembling, and unmistakably Miranda's. Mr. Garrett, it's Miranda Ashford. I need to speak with you alone. It's about Adrien and what my father did to him. Greg raised an eyebrow, but I could see the wheels turning in his detective mind. This was exactly the inside connection we needed. Where would you like to meet? I asked. Overman Park by the old stone bridge in 2 hours. Please, Mr. Garrett, I can't live with myself knowing what he's done. The line went dead, leaving the three of us staring at each other across the kitchen table. Could be a trap, Greg warned. But his tone suggested he didn't really believe it. No, Adrien said firmly. Miranda's not like her father. She's good people, Dad. If she's reaching out, it's because she wants to help. 2 hours later, I found myself walking through Overman Park, where Sarah and I used to bring Adrien to feed the ducks when he was little. The October afternoon was crisp with golden leaves crunching under my feet as I made my way to the stone bridge that had stood there since the 1930s. Miranda was already waiting, sitting on one of the weathered stone benches. She looked smaller, somehow fragile in her navy peacoat coat, her usually perfect blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. When she saw me approaching, she stood up quickly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Mr. Garrett, thank you for coming. Her voice was steady, but I could see the guilt and anguish in her eyes. I need you to know that I had no idea what my father was planning. When Adrien came home beaten like that, she paused, taking a shaky breath. I've never been so ashamed to be in Ashford. I sat down on the bench, gesturing for her to join me. Tell me what you know, Miranda. She sat down, leaving space between us, as if she didn't deserve to be too close to someone whose family her father had hurt. Growing up, I always wondered about my father's business deals, she began. Competitors would suddenly decide to sell their companies for far less than they were worth. People who opposed his developments would have sudden financial troubles or health problems. Her voice grew quieter. I told myself it was just coincidence that successful businessmen always have enemies who spread rumors. A jogger passed by and Miranda waited until they were out of earshot before continuing. But after what happened to Adrien, I started paying closer attention, really listening to his phone calls, watching his meetings. She turned to face me directly. Mr. Garrett, my father, isn't just a businessman. He's been systematically destroying anyone who gets in his way for years. The pain in her voice was genuine, and I found myself believing every word. Why are you telling me this? I asked gently. Because I love Adrien, she said simply. And because I can't stand by and watch my father hurt more innocent people. I've been complicit through my silence for too long. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small key. This is to my father's private office at home. He keeps files there. Records of payments to certain people, photos, documents that prove what he's been doing. My heart started racing. This could be the evidence Greg said we needed. Miranda, if your father discovers you helped us, I know the risks, she interrupted. But I also know where he keeps records that could expose everything. Financial transactions, correspondence with his associates, evidence of things that would put him away for life. She stood up, smoothing down her coat. We need to act within the next few days before he makes his next move. I overheard him on the phone this morning. He's not done with your family, Mr. Garrett. The plan was simple but dangerous. Miranda would access her father's office during his Thursday night meeting while Greg and I monitored from my truck down the street. Testing Miranda's whisper came through the tiny earpiece. Can you hear me? Crystal clear. Greg responded. You've got maybe 2 hours. Get what you can, and get out. The Ashford mansion loomed against the night sky like a Gothic fortress. Through binoculars, we watched Miranda navigate the darkened hallways using her phone's flashlight. I'm at his office, she whispered, using the key. Now my hands were sweating if Reginald caught her. I mean, oh my God, there are so many files. For the next hour, we listened to Miranda work through her father's records. The picture she painted made my stomach turn. There's a filing cabinet labeled acquisitions, but these aren't normal business deals. Photos of families being evicted, payments to someone called the cleaner, medical records that don't make sense. Greg and I exchanged grim looks. The disappeared families. The convenient accidents. All documented like a twisted business ledger. I'm copying everything to USB, taking photos as backup. Payments going back 15 years. Names I recognize. The Hendersons, the Kowalskis. I remembered both families. The Hendersons had supposedly moved to Florida after selling their farm cheap. The Kowskis closed their restaurant after Mrs. Kowalski's sudden illness. Now I understood what really happened. Miranda, how much more? Greg asked urgently. Almost. Done. I'm in his desk. Wait. Her voice changed tight with fear. There's a folder labeled Future Projects. It has Adrienne's name on it. My blood ran cold. What does it say? Garrett's situation written across the top with photos of our house, your work schedule, Adrienne's daily routine. This isn't just about the invention anymore. He's been planning something bigger. Before I could respond, we heard a car engine, growing closer. Miranda, Greg said sharply. Someone's coming. That's impossible. Dad's meeting never ends before midnight. The car door slammed. Through binoculars, we saw headlights sweeping across the driveway. Reginald's Mercedes had returned early. Dad's back, early. Miranda's voice was tight with panic. I need to get out now. Can you make it to your room? Greg asked. I don't know. He always checks his office first when he gets home. If he finds me here. The front door opened. Reginald's silhouette appeared, already heading toward his office wing. Miranda, move now, I whispered urgently. Whatever it takes. Get out of there. The phone rang at dawn, jolting me awake after a restless night worrying about Miranda. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but something in my gut told me to answer. Mr. Garrett, the voice was growing nervous. My name is Rodri Stowe. I used to work for Reginald Ashford. We need to talk. I sat up in bed, instantly alert. What about your son? About what Ashford's planning to do to your family? I can't live with this anymore. 2 hours later, Greg and I walked through the morning mist toward St. Mary's Church on the outskirts of Cedar Falls. The old stone building had stood there since the 1800s, a place where generations of families had sought sanctuary and forgiveness. We found 2 men waiting in the last pew, one older, maybe 55, with weathered hands and haunted eyes. The younger one, probably in his 30s, kept glancing nervously at the doors. I'm Rodri, the older man said, standing as we approached. "This is my brother, Jasper. We both worked for Ashford, though in different capacities." Greg's detective instincts were on full alert. "What kind of work?" Rodri's shoulders sagged. "I was what you might call a problem solver. For 8 years. Whenever someone stood in Ashford's way, I made sure they reconsidered their position." The weight of his confession settled over us like a heavy blanket. This man had been part of the machine that destroyed families. "Why are you coming forward now?" I asked. "Because I have a daughter," Rodri said quietly. "She's about your son's age, living up in Minneapolis." When I heard what Ashford ordered done to Adrin, I saw her face instead of his, AP struggling with emotion. "I can't be part of this anymore." Jasper spoke for the first time, his voice shaky. "I worked in communications, monitoring calls, recording conversations for insurance purposes. I have recordings of everything." He pulled out a small digital device, his hands trembling slightly. "Phone calls, where Mr. Ashford discusses eliminating competitors, covering up accidents that weren't really accidents, paying people to disappear." Greg leaned forward. "How recent are these recordings?" "As recent as yesterday," Jasper replied. "After your daughter-in-law's visit to his office last night, he made several calls. He knows someone was in there." My blood turned to ice. "Is Miranda safe?" "For now," Brick said, "but not for long. Ashford suspects family betrayal, and that's something he's never tolerated." Jasper activated the device, and suddenly Reginald's cold voice filled the sacred space. "The Garrett problem has escalated beyond simple intimidation. We need a permanent resolution. Something that looks completely natural. I want the whole family handled. Father, son, and my traitorous daughter if necessary." The recording continued, with chilling details about timing methods and cleanup procedures. It was like listening to someone plan a military operation, except the target was my family. "When was this recorded?" Greg asked, his cop training keeping him focused despite the horror. "Last night, around 11:30, Jasper replied. "Right after he discovered his office had been accessed." Roderick met my eyes. "There's more. He scheduled what he calls the final solution for tomorrow evening. He's bringing in specialists from out of state, people with no local connections who can make it look like a tragic accident." The church seemed to grow colder around us. "Tomorrow evening, less than 24 hours. He's planning to act tomorrow evening," Rodri continued. "We have less than 24 hours before he moves against your family." By 4 o'clock that afternoon, we had transformed St. Mary's Church into a carefully orchestrated trap. Greg's old police contacts had provided us with professional recording equipment hidden throughout the sanctuary, like electronic angels watching over our desperate gamble. "This is our one shot," Greg said, adjusting a tiny microphone behind the altar cross. "If Reginald suspects anything, he'll disappear and we'll never get another chance." Adrien sat in the front pew, his bruises still visible, but his eyes burning with determination. "I should be the bait," he said for the third time. "It's my invention he wants." "No," I replied firmly, remembering my father's words about protecting family with wisdom, not just courage. "Jasper knows how to talk to him. You and I will be listening from the vestry, ready to come out once we have everything on tape." The plan, was elegant in its simplicity. Jasper would call Reginald, claiming that Garrett's situation was under control and awaiting final instructions. The church's acoustics would ensure every word was captured clearly. At 5:30, Jasper made the call. "Mr. Ashford's Jasper. Everything's in position. The family is contained and waiting for your decision on how to proceed." Through our hidden earpiece, we could hear Reginald's cold satisfaction. "Excellent. I'll be there in 20 minutes. This needs to be handled properly. No loose ends, no traces back to me." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the stained glass windows, we took our positions. Greg crouched behind the organ. Adrian and I hid in the small vest, and Jasper stood near the altar, looking appropriately nervous for someone about to commit multiple crimes. The sound of expensive leather shoes on old wooden floors announced Reginald's arrival. He entered alone. His arrogance had convinced him the situation was completely under his control. "Where are they?" Reginald's voice echoed through the sacred space, cold and businesslike. "In the back room, sir. All 3 of them, Leonard, Adrian, and your daughter. They're secured and waiting for your instructions." I held my breath. This was the moment of truth. Reginald walked deeper into the church, his footsteps confident. "Good. Now listen carefully, because I want this done exactly right. The father and son need to disappear permanently. Make it look like they fled town after realizing they were in over their heads. A car accident on a remote highway would be perfect." The recording equipment captured every chilling word. "And my daughter," Reginald continued, his voice devoid of any paternal emotion. Miranda has proven she can't be trusted with family loyalty. She'd need to be educated about the consequences of betrayal, perhaps a tragic accident of her own, something that looks like she was trying to help her boyfriend's family escape. Jasper played his part, perfectly nodding and asking for clarification on details that made my stomach turn. Reginald spoke about our elimination like he was discussing a business merger, calculating, methodical, utterly without conscience. The most important thing, Reginald said, moving closer to where we were hidden, is that nothing can be traced back to me or my organization. I've built my reputation on being above suspicion, and I won't have it destroyed by a nobody inventor. And his pathetic family. He paused, surveying the church with satisfaction. Once this is handled, I'll have complete control over that energy storage technology. The patents will be transferred to my company. The profits will be mine, and no one will ever know how I acquired them. Jasper cleared his throat nervously. And the cleanup, sir. Make sure there's nothing left that can be traced back to me. The church doors burst open just as Reginald finished his chilling instructions, flooding the sanctuary with bright lights and the sound of official vehicles pulling up outside. FBI agents in tactical gear streamed through every entrance, their weapons drawn and badges gleaming under the sudden illumination. Federal agents, nobody move. Reginald spun around his face, transforming from cold confidence to absolute shock in the span of a heartbeat. For the first time since I'd known him, the man who controlled half of Cedar Falls looked genuinely afraid. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, but his voice cracked slightly. "I'm here for a private prayer service." Agent Sarah Martinez, the lead investigator, stepped forward with a recording device in her hand. "Mr. Reginald Ashford, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, extortion, and racketeering. Everything you just said has been recorded and will be used as evidence." That's when Adrian, Greg, and I emerged from the vestry, followed by a news crew that had been waiting outside. Reginald's eyes widened as he realized the full scope of how completely he'd been out. "You!" he snarled, pointing at me with a trembling finger. "This is entrapment. This is illegal. My lawyers will have this thrown out before." "Actually," Agent Martinez interrupted, "this is a citizen's investigation that uncovered evidence of ongoing criminal conspiracy. Every recording was made with the consent of willing participants." Jasper stepped forward, removing the wire he'd been wearing, including me. "Mr. Ashford, I've been cooperating with federal authorities for the past 6 hours. The look of betrayal on Reginald's face might have been satisfying if it weren't so pathetic. This man who had destroyed families and eliminated anyone in his way was finally facing the consequences of his actions. Miranda called out desperately as his daughter entered the church flanked by more agents. "Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Tell them about family loyalty." Miranda walked up to her father, her spine straight and her voice steady. "Family loyalty works both ways. Dad, I couldn't let you hurt more innocent families. I couldn't be silent while you destroyed people's lives. For money, you ungrateful." Reginald started, but Agent Martinez cut him off. "Mr. Ashford, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." As the handcuffs clicked around Reginald's wrists, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. This man who had seemed so powerful, so untouchable, now looked like what he really was. A criminal who had finally run out of people to intimidate. "This isn't over," Reginald hissed as the agents began to lead him away. "I have connections you can't imagine. Judges, politicians, people who owe me favors. I'll be out in a week, and when I am, you'll regret the day you decided to cross me." But his threats sounded hollow now. The desperate bluster of a man who knew his empire was crumbling. Adrian put his arm around Miranda, who was crying quietly, not from sadness, but from relief. "It's over," he whispered to her. "You did the right thing." Agent Martinez approached us as the last of the equipment was being packed up. "We'll need full statements from all of you, but I want you to know this investigation is going to uncover a lot more than just threats against your family. The evidence you've provided is going to help us solve cases going back 15 years. As we watched Reginald's car disappear into the night, red and blue lights flashing, I thought about Sarah and what she would have said about this moment. She always believed that good people working together could overcome any evil. "You have no idea what you've started." Reginald's voice echoed from the police car. "This won't end here," but it already had ended. Justice had been served. 6 months later, I sat in the Cedar Falls courthouse, watching justice finally close its books on Reginald Ashford. The man who had once seemed untouchable stood in orange prison garb as Judge Patricia Williams delivered his sentence. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for conspiracy to commit murder, plus 30 additional years for extortion, racketeering, and criminal enterprise. The gavel's bang echoed through the packed courtroom, and I felt Sarah's presence beside me, as if she were nodding her approval from wherever good souls go when their work on earth is done. Adrian squeezed my hand from the seat beside me. His bruises had long since healed, but more importantly, the fear in his eyes had been replaced by something I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Pure joy. "It's really over, Dad," he whispered. 3 weeks later, I stood in the backyard of our house on Franklin Street, watching Adriana Justice tie for the third time. The October afternoon was crisp and golden, with the same autumn light that had witnessed our darkest hours now blessing our brightest moment. "You're nervous, son." "Terrified," he admitted with a grin, but the good kind of terrified. Miranda appeared in the doorway, wearing Sarah's wedding dress, which we'd carefully altered to fit her. She looked radiant, but more than that, she looked free. Free from the shadow of her father's crimes. Free to choose love over money. Free to build the kind of family she'd always dreamed of. Greg walked her down the aisle in our backyard garden, past the same garage where Adrian had built his first robot, where he developed the renewable energy system that had nearly cost us everything, but ultimately saved us all. The technology had been successfully patented and sold to Midwest Clean Energy Solutions for a sum that would secure Adrian and Miranda's future for generations. But more than the money, it was the knowledge that his invention would help power American homes with clean, sustainable energy that made Adrian's eyes shine with pride. Pastor Williams from St. Mary's, the same church where we trapped Reginald, performed the ceremony. When Adrian and Miranda exchanged vows, promising to love each other through whatever challenges life might bring, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. We'd started as victims, frightened and overwhelmed by forces beyond our control. But we discovered something Reginald Ashford never understood: that ordinary people, bound together by love and determination, possess a power that no amount of money can buy. "I promise to stand by you," Miranda said, her voice clear and strong. "To choose courage over comfort, truth over convenience, and love over everything else." Adrian's response brought tears to my eyes. "I promise to build our future together, to create something beautiful from whatever materials life gives us. Just like my father taught me, just like his father taught him." After the ceremony, as neighbors and friends celebrated in our modest backyard, I found myself standing by Sarah's rose garden, thinking about the lessons this experience had taught us. Rodri and Jasper had both received reduced sentences in exchange for their cooperation, and both were working to rebuild their lives. Even in the darkest circumstances, conscience could still awaken, and redemption was always possible. As the sun set over Cedar Falls, Adrian and Miranda cut their wedding cake. A simple chocolate creation from Brendan's Bakery downtown, the same place where Sarah used to buy my birthday cakes. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but made with love, by people who cared about their community. "Dad," Adrian said, pulling me aside as the evening wound down, "Miranda and I have some news. We're expecting a baby in the spring." I felt my heart expand with a joy I hadn't experienced since the day Adrian was born. A new generation, a fresh start, a chance to pass on the values that had carried our family through its darkest hour. That night, as I sat on the front porch, watching the stars emerge over our quiet street, I whispered a prayer of gratitude to Sarah, to my father, and to whatever force in the universe ensures that love ultimately triumphs over hate, that justice eventually overcomes corruption, and that hope always finds a way to bloom, even in the hardest soil. Looking back on everything that happened to our family, I realized this wasn't just about protecting Adrian's invention or standing up to a powerful man. This was about something much deeper: the eternal struggle between good and evil, between those who use their power to lift others up and those who use it to tear others down. God works in mysterious ways, and I believe he placed each person in our path for a reason. Rodri and Jasper found their conscience when it mattered most. Miranda chose love over luxury. Even Greg's old police connections became instruments of justice when we needed them most. The Lord teaches us that no weapon formed against the righteous shall prosper, and our story proves that truth. When Reginald thought he had all the power, when he believed money and connections made him untouchable, God was already preparing his downfall through the very people he thought he controlled. If there's one lesson I want to pass on from this grandpa's story, it's this: never let anyone convince you that your dreams don't matter because of where you come from. Adrian's invention didn't become valuable because a rich man wanted it. It was always valuable because it came from a good heart and brilliant mind. This true story taught our family that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they stand together. We learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, despite being afraid. Most importantly, we discovered that love and determination can overcome any obstacle, no matter how powerful your enemies might seem. Sometimes the most important grandpa stories aren't about fairy tales or distant heroes.